Times are rapidly changing. Think about COVID, social and environmental changes. Think about generational shifts or the rise of AI. And these are just a few examples that current leaders are confronted with. So what could be the solution to deal with all the challenges as a leader? I think adaptive leadership could be the answer. And why? Because adaptive leadership is all about change, all about innovation. Adaptive leaders, they believe that if things change, you have a challenge to innovate. Because if there's a change and you can adapt to it, you need to be very creative, and creativity leads to innovation. But adaptive leaders are also very resilient, because you have to be resilient to be able to handle change, because a change can also be a setback. And how do they do that? Because they believe that they work for a higher goal. They work for a purpose. And they don't focus just on a task. They focus on results, but not on the task. That also gives them a huge competitive advantage. Why? Because they are so easy to be flexible. They can instantly make a decision and change course, as long as it contributes to the purpose, the higher goal. And this also means sustainable growth, because they don't fail if one direction doesn't work, as long as they contribute to the higher purpose. And by being so flexible and are very good in making decisions, they can also are able to, in an early stage, see a risk or an opportunity and adjust the strategy towards the opportunity before, especially when there's a risk, before the risks really cause a damage. So how do adaptive leaders work? How do they do that? Well, like I said, it's all about working towards your purpose and have a very clear vision and mission and communicate that. So usually adaptive leaders are very good in communication, in open communication. And they're also, adaptive leaders, they are very resilient, but they also use a setback to learn. They are very curious. They want to learn from every situation. And so that's why they embrace change. But what they also do, what they're able to, they're very empathic. And they have some kind of cultural intelligence. They understand how important a very positive, flexible culture is. Because adaptive leaders, they're so good in making instant decisions, and they have to get the team along. So it's not only that they have to be flexible, no, also the team have to be flexible. And that is why they're so good, have to be so good in communication. So what can be a strategy to implement adaptive leadership within the company? I think one of the most important things here is to be able to be a situational leader. An adaptive leader knows that every team and every individual needs to be spoken to in a different way. They have all different needs. And every situation asks for a different leadership style. Sometimes it can be gender leadership. Sometimes it can be transformative leadership. But adaptive leaders, they handle all these styles. Another thing to implement adaptive leadership into the company is to embrace feedback. Make sure there's a culture where everybody can say what they want, even when it's criticism. And within this culture, you can make sure that failure is a chance for growth. So embrace failure. I know a story of an employee. He was responsible for a project of 20 million euro. And he totally messed up. And it was his own fault. He could have prevented it. So he went to the CEO to ask to resign. And the CEO looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? I just gave you an education for 20 million euro. And now you want to leave the company?" So make sure that people are allowed to fail. But also involve the employees in decision making. Because if you want to make them co-responsible, they must also be co-responsible for the decisions that are made. Another thing to implement adaptive leadership as a strategy is to be very flexible in the planning. Be flexible in the goal planning and the task planning, because everything can change day by day. But there's more you can do to implement adaptive leadership. One thing you can do is support curiosity and learning. Because for every new situation, you need new knowledge. So make sure that the employees can gain that knowledge or have the knowledge already in advance. But the most important thing, if you want to implement adaptive leadership within the company, is that you hire employees who really feel the purpose by heart, and that you have employees already working there who are really engaged in the purpose and the higher goal. Make sure that everybody understands why it is important that they work the way they work. Make sure that everybody knows what they contribute to the company. Make sure they know what they contribute to the customers. And make sure that they understand how it is important and what they contribute to society. Because that is what damn good adaptive leadership is all about.